Hi guys, this is Nathan, and I'm talking about effective collaborative learning in the 21st century. To go over the agenda, we're going to start about a little bit of an introduction, talk about collaborative learning, the constructivist approach, how we can combine those two in our classrooms, and then some more examples of how you can teach it in your classroom. So first to begin, so according to Cornell University's Center for Teaching Innovation, they define collaborative learning as learning that can occur between peer-to-peer or in larger groups. So basically, it's learning that's not by yourself anymore. It could be you and a partner, it could be you and 10 people in a larger group, it could be somebody who's in a grade lower than you, and that's kind of like that peer-to-peer like tutoring, or it can be in a grade higher than you. So you have maybe like a fifth grader come in and with second graders and help them kind of go over some things that they're not doing very well with. That sort of collaboration is what we're looking for in our classrooms. And this is critical for development of a well-rounded student who can collaborate with others because the student will begin to understand that their part is critical towards their whole group's success. And if they don't show up and they don't do their part, then they are missing out on A, the learning experiences, and B, they're letting their group down. So the responsibility aspect gets a little more important than if it was just yourselves. Cornell also defines peer learning as a type of collaborative learning that involves students working in pairs or small groups to discuss concepts or find solutions to problems. So again, it can be used for almost anything. It could be guided reading peer-to-peer. It could be math, history, science, English, all sorts of different things can be used for collaborative learning. And it is crucial that we need to get this into our schools more and more so that students aren't becoming bored almost with their learning. They are learning that education and learning is a lifelong journey, and I will always be learning just as a teacher is. While our textbooks talk about collaboration, they more define it as people can collaborate while respecting people's differences and being sure that they are mindful of our students and peers. So they're more focused on the social kind of aspects, making sure that people do have different opinions, and we do have to respect that in our education settings. And being able to know that people are different from us and they have to respect that regardless of what they believe or not. Moving in, I just wanted to include this quote. It says, collaboration allows us to know more than we are capable of knowing by ourselves, by all souls are. I found this online and I thought it was just a wonderful quote. I think it really speaks to my mind and how I want to teach. When you're by yourself, you only have one set of knowledge, whatever's in your noggin. When you have eight people, that's eight times the knowledge, eight times the life experience, and eight times the ability to achieve greatness. So collaboration is something that should be really more talked about and included in our classrooms. And I feel like it is more and more as we progress further and further in our education. So constructivists, there are two different kinds. There's cognitive and social. To begin, we'll talk about cognitive constructivism, which was developed by Piaget and Perry, and they defined it as a development of cognitive approach that focused on the mental processes rather than observable behaviors. So more on how people were kind of like thinking about those rather than, oh, I saw that person was sad because of XYZ. Now, when I see those XYZ, I also am going to be sad. And this comes from the Cognitive Constructivist Institute, the GSI Teaching and Resource Center, which is a wonderful resource. If you ever are interested, you can go there and they have a bunch of wonderful resources for collaborative learning. Cognitive also focus on learning as something that we have to discover and engage in all the time, meaning that you are always learning and therefore you should always have an active mind, as they quoted and said. Active mind more meaning that you are still always learning. You're never not going to be learning, whether you're 2 or you're 92. You're still learning until the last day you are on this earth. And that is important in our education and for our students to understand that they are going to be lifelong learners, whether they are the next president of the United States or they're the janitor at the school. They are still going to be learning regardless. And they more talked about motivation equaling restructuring and personal investment. So focusing on that if I want to be motivated, I have to put something into it. And I may even have to change the way I think of my motivation to help me think more of my education. Now, moving into the social aspect of it, that was developed by Vygotsky, and he said all cognitive functions originate in social interactions, and that learning did not simply comprise the assimilation and accommodation of new knowledge by learners. That was also from the same article, Social Constructivism by GSI Teaching and Resource Center. Again, great website. But he more focused on saying that the interactions that students, people, adults, grandparents, whomever have with others is what defines learning. And then it cannot simply be combined as assimilation of the new knowledge that they get from teachers. So when you're told something by a teacher, it's not just that, it's the way that you are told and the way that the others around you perceive that sort of information. So focusing on the way that people interact with society is how they can also learn to understand those sort of things. So, if you ever see, like your parent cry about something, obviously it must have been sensitive for them. And so maybe you will also feel that similar emotion. And therefore, you have to learn how to become that member of that better understanding of that. Also, learn to become the better member of society through language, culture, and other stimuli. So we are all surrounded by different stimuli every single day. And therefore, we have different sorts of different sorts of way that we can engage, understand things. And then finally, learning being a collaborative process, sorting them versus into the actual and the potential. The actual being more what we learn, and the potential being how did you learn that and that sort of environment. So moving on to collaboration and constructivist. So the benefits of teaching in a collaborative and constructivist manner include self-management, which can be, how students manage their time. It could be how students manage their work. It could be how students manage their responsibilities versus relying on the teacher saying, you're going to be the reader and you're going to be the talker and you're going to be the, XYZ. Now, students can self-manage themselves and self-regulate themselves. And we say, I want to be the talker today. Could you be the writer? And could you be the note taker or something like that? That allows for them to become more refined adults, even at a younger age. They're able to pick and choose and self-regulate and self-manage themselves within their time, within their orientation, within their groups, and within their lives. Moving on to responsibility for one's actions versus blaming others. So now that we're in a collaborative setting, the role of yours is way more important now because it's no longer just your grade, it's everybody else's grade. And therefore, if you don't do your part, you're letting your group down and you're letting your grade down versus blaming others. If a student didn't do their work and it was a solo project, the only person they have to blame is themselves because they're the only person that they can blame. They can't blame anybody else. But in the collaborative and in constructivist sort of setting, they are now even more at stake because if they drop the ball, they've let their group down, they've let themselves down, they let their teacher down because they did not complete that assignment. So with that, it ties in that sort of self-management. Like, hey, I'm in a group now, I have to get my work done because I do not want to let my group down. Moving on into self-esteem. So with that, you have an increased self-esteem versus in a traditional classroom, you have a lack of self-esteem. With the increased self-esteem, it comes from, again, the responsibility, the self-management, the self-regulation. It shows them, hey, I can do all this stuff. I've been doing all this stuff and I'm doing so well at it. I've been doing great A's. I've been having a great time collaborating with people. My teacher says I'm doing great. My parents are proud of me. It helps boost their self-esteem and feel more confident in their learning and in their engagement. Which is wonderful for our students. We want to have high self-esteem within our kids, or else they are not going to learn as well as they should. Some other benefits from a teacher's perspective, instructors may gain some insight from their students by observing the way that they talk and interact with their students. So from the teacher's perspective, if you're standing back and letting your kids do their work, you can see, hey, little Timmy's not working very well with that group. Maybe next time we need to move him to a different group and see if he collaborates with them better. Or the three of them are doing so well over there. They're good rock stars. They're regulating their time. They've been doing great self-management. They've all got their projects turned in, or they're part of their projects turned in on time. So they've got the responsibility down. It's just one thing after another that's increasing their ability to comprehend and increasing their education. And finally, opportunities to process core materials through writing, talking, thinking, and problem solving gives students multiple avenues for learning. So say one person would rather write a paper, but somebody else would rather do a presentation, and somebody else wants to even maybe a play or something, but it all fits into the description of a project for history or something. It just allows for people to think and act in different ways because there's no one checklist for how somebody can do something. Now, sometimes obviously there has to be, if a test has to be done, it has to follow a certain sort of, curriculum and whatnot, and sort of standards and that kind of stuff. But for other aspects, there's total freedom in it, and that should allow those students to think creatively and active learning within their engagements. And so some examples of the bottoms are group learning, group inquiries, peer-to-peer reading groups. So putting somebody who's maybe at a Q level reading in second grade, and maybe somebody who is like H level reading group. So it is a huge difference, but the Q level can help the H level sound out words, follow patterns. They can also help them think how they read as well, because they're the same age. They'll be able to relate to each other and think like, hey, that word I got tricked up on beforehand when I was at an H level, but now that I'm at a Q, I've been able to figure out how I can do those sort of things. So that peer-to-peer relationship can be phenomenal for kids to learn. Guided math problems, kind of more just like team collaborative efforts, like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing on this one. Can you help me? Not give the answer, but could you help me figure out how to do this? I'm kind of lost, that kind of stuff. And then peer-to-peer tutoring. So maybe having somebody who's from like the 5th grade come into the 2nd grade classroom, and help them sort of teach and learn as well as the 5th graders are learning, because they're learning, I can explain this to somebody, which means I'm good enough to understand the concept and then go further and explain it. So that increases the 5th graders' self-esteem, and that increases their responsibility, which again is a phenomenal thing for our students to have. So lastly, we're just going to move into some examples of teaching it. So on the first day of school, do lots of icebreakers and lots of group work. So it'll help cement the idea that this classroom is going to be really group focused. It also helped break down those barriers of awkwardness that everyone has on the first day. They're not very social sometimes, and that's totally fine. We all have our days that we don't wish to be social and whatnot. So we're going to do our best in this classroom, at least, to work on that and become better. They could be long icebreakers, short icebreakers. They could be group icebreakers, peer-to-peer, student to teacher icebreakers, all sorts of things. So it kind of breaks down those barriers and allows for a community to become established. Moving in, again, lots and lots of group work. There's never enough group work. So don't ever think that something could be turned into a group project or a group activity or peer-to-peer or peer to 5th grader or whatever. It always could be. So keep that in mind whenever you are thinking of something, that it could be done in a group setting, and it can be highly beneficial for your students. And then finally, also examples of your students. Why are we doing so much group work? If you're teaching 4th grade, they've had years of beforehand where they didn't do a lot of maybe group work, and this is totally new to them. So giving them the reasons why you're doing this, because that's going to help increase your responsibility as a student. It's going to help increase your self-esteem. It's going to help us become a better community, because we're all going to know each other and all become better. And then finally, it's going to allow me as an instructor to feel confident in my teaching, because you will all have each other to help answer questions, figure things out, sort out questions, all sorts of things. So it'll help all of us collectively become a more sensible community and have a better understanding of our education and learning. Next is just my bibliography. And then finally, thank you guys so much. Hope you guys have a nice day and enjoy the rest of your time.